Welcome to the Maria Sanchez Show. It's Wednesday, November 17th, and we are live. It's 4 o'clock-ish, so that's good. We hit our mark, kind of. We're live every day, Monday through Friday, from 4 to 5 o'clock, or depending if the guest goes long, we go long. It's internet television. We're rewriting the rules of local broadcasting so we can do what we want when we want. Speaking of doing what we want when we want, that would be tomorrow. Tomorrow is Thursday, November 18th. We are not going to have our program at 4. We're going to have it at 5:30 because we're shooting the pre-show before President George W. Bush lands here in Ventura County, and he's speaking at the Reagan Library from 6 to 7 o'clock. It's sold out. But guess what? You can watch it because we're simulcasting at kadytv.com. So just log on, get comfortable, get a glass of coffee, tea, glass of wine, whatever, and join us while we simulcast President Bush's talk. Now, it's Wednesday, so that means what? That means Scott Harris is in studio with us. Scott Harris is our political correspondent, and Scott visits with us every Wednesday. We appreciate you taking the time. He is a business owner in the Conejo Valley. We are in downtown Ventura. That means Scott makes a drive.
It's a great drive. I made it last night. Had dinner at 71 Palm.
Oh my goodness.
Which is a few hundred yards from here.
I've never been there.
Really, it is fantastic.
Is it?
It really, really is. We were there with a couple of friends that we have dinner with every couple of months, and we rotate restaurants. And last night was 71 Palm, and it is extraordinary.
I'm glad to hear you say that because I've never heard anybody speak about it one way or the other.
It is terrific. And I'll tell you what, just off the record, if you go, get the macaroni and cheese.
This is on the record.
They make a macaroni and cheese.
I can't imagine ordering macaroni and cheese in a restaurant.
I've done it. It is fantastic.
Really?
It's a great macaroni and cheese.
And you didn't call me.
I did not.
I'm
I did
teasing,
not.
of course.
But I will next time.
Yeah, right.
And DDA is the chef there and does a terrific job. It's just a great place.
Okay.
So there's our pitch on live television.
There you go.
You
and it's walking
can't take it away.
distance from the studio.
And it's walking distance from the studio. We should go there one week after we finish the show.
Okay.
We could just walk over there.
Do that.
Not while we're here, though.
No. We're here. We were going to talk about the California State Supreme Court ruling this week that was unanimous, I might add.
Yes. And it was. This is an interesting week for public education in California. In our next segment, we're going to talk a bit about the budget and the impact that that's going to have on education. But this
the budget deficit.
The budget deficit.
Yeah, that would be.
This is a tough week for California residents and higher education. You know, we have this magnificent UC system and Cal State system throughout California and community college. I think there's 119 community colleges. I'm close if I'm not exactly right. There's 9 UCs and I believe 23 Cal States. And this was built for California citizens. That's what we built the system for. Our tax dollars paid for it, or our parents or grandparents paid for that to be built. And the idea was to have the best educated citizenry in the state, in the country, which would probably make us the best educated in the world. And we did that for a while. That's how we built such a great state.
On a public level.
On a public level.
Right.
We did a magnificent job of doing that. This week, we took 2 significant steps to say California citizens don't really matter as much to the California public education system.
Legal California citizens.
It's not just, legal California citizens, but what's interesting is, and we'll talk about the illegal immigrants and their role in the UC and Cal State system, but there was another notice that came out, again, if you were following, it came out on Monday. The UC systems announced for the first time for many of them ever, they're going to aggressively recruit out-of-state and international students. And they're going to try to bring them into the state. Why? Because they pay $23,000 a year more at the UC level than our children pay as in-state residents. So what happens is we go out to get these kids, and I understand that. They're driven financially to do that. If your son is raised in Oregon or in India, he pays $23,000 more than my son does to go to the same school. Problem is that I've been paying taxes all the time for my child to go, and now my kid can't get in. There's a huge waiting list in public education right now and in upper education. So we're taking those kids instead of California citizens. And now we add on that, California Supreme Court, State Supreme Court, has reinforced the law that illegal immigrants who go to high school in California for 3 years then get to pay the same rates as California citizens.
Right. So but you don't even need to, excuse me.
No, go ahead.
To say that it's any student who goes for 3 years to a California high school and graduates gets in, regardless of their status of illegal or not.
But the court case was not about whether you're a legal citizen.
Right.
The court, we can play and dance around that, but the court case was about the people that are here illegally that attend high school and then want to attend college and don't want to pay out-of-state rates.
Right.
And so it's interesting because, we're a local station here, and so one of our local writers, Tim Hurt, political writer for the Ventura County Star, had a column about that this morning. And his position was that we should let them in because they've gone to school here and it's not fair to not let them go. And I understand that. That's an emotional reaction, and I get that. It's hard to look at a kid who's gone to school here for 3 or 4 years, has done well, has generated the grades, to get into a UC or Cal State, and then is denied because they're here illegally, which they probably had nothing to do with because the odds are pretty good their parents moved them here when they were young and put them through the school system.
Which they got to go through the school system for free.
There is a little something to be said for that. It does irritate some people. For others, they feel it's an obligation that we have as a state. But what happens then is when you do that, you deny California citizens. There's a number of issues with this. Number one, you deny the California citizens that want to go, that meet the standards, but maybe weren't as qualified as somebody who was here illegally. So they don't get to go. So the taxes that you and I have paid into the system to build this education system so our children can go, they don't get to go. That's one issue. Number two, and this is just kind of like Prop 19. If you remember our conversations from Prop 19, which was we wanted to legalize marijuana, and the feds said, no, you can't do that. The feds have a law that says you can't do what we're doing.
Right.
So we are, again, as a state, the first one out of 50 in contradiction with federal law. Now, for a lot of people, that's a great thing. They're saying, thank God, we're finally recognizing these people are here. We invite them here to mow our lawns and pick our fruit and wash our dishes. The least we should do is educate them. And I understand that position. I don't agree with it, but I understand it. So that becomes an issue that we have to deal with, which is, we're in, again, conflict with federal law. So that becomes a bit of a problem. And the third one, and the one that I haven't heard about or read about in any of the articles and columns, and some of them are outraged and angry, and some of them are saying, fine, this is a fair thing. As business owners, we're not allowed to hire illegal immigrants.
Right.
So it's great people say, well, if we're going to have them here, we need to educate them. But to what end? Because theoretically, when they're 23, 24 years old and they graduate from UC San Diego or UC Santa Barbara or Cal State Channel Islands here locally, I'm not allowed to hire them. I'm legally responsible to ensure that they're not here illegally. So you kind of look at that and say, at what point do we allow the reality of this to enter our thought process? Where do we go with this? If we're going to say, well, as long as you're here, we'll get you through high school. As long as you finished high school, we'll get you through college. But then as long as you've gotten through college, but now we can't hire you because I can't risk the legal ramifications of hiring you. So are we educating them to go back to their home countries, which many of them have never visited because they were,
Well, the foreign students often go back to their
But
home
they
countries,
pay full rates.
Right, they pay the
They pay
out-of-state
full rates.
tuition.
And I think one of the things that you have to recognize is I understand the issue of they go to high school here and we should consider educating them through college. I mean, I get that emotionally. But part of the process that we have to go through is you have to prioritize. So should somebody who's here illegally have priority over a California citizen whose parents have been paying taxes in the system, or should they even have priority over, let's say, someone who was born in Oregon? Because someone who's born in Oregon has to pay $23,000 more than someone who was born in Guatemala or Mexico or Canada or
Right.
wherever it might be. And so you kind of look at that, and generically, if you just say they've gone to high school here, they've been here their whole lives, don't you think they should go to college? That does sound great. But you have to look at it realistically and say we only have so many slots in the university system. And California citizens are being denied some of those slots. And now the UCs have come out and publicly said, we're going to go all over the country and all over the world and see who else we can bring in to kick California citizens out. And so that's a bit of an issue for someone who has 2 children who are California citizens.
And I have a similar issue on a smaller scale because my kids have been educated in the parochial system since kindergarten. Mm-hmm. So I've been paying property taxes and tuition. And it was only my second son who actually availed himself because he went to UC Davis. So I finally got somebody to take advantage of all the money that I've been putting in and not availing myself. So then here now you add insult to injury. You do that, you do that, you do that.
And then you don't get into UC Davis.
Right.
And I get the argument. If everybody who met the standards, if everybody who was a California citizen who met the standards to get into a Cal State or UC got in, and there were still slots
left over,
I'm open now to going and recruiting in India or Oregon or Mexico or illegal immigrants. I get that. Mm-hmm. But I don't get any of that if you're denying California citizens. I think that's the issue that we're going to have to deal with, and I tend to think we will.
Because a lot of the people are saying that because it was a unanimous decision, there's going to be a lot of thought in appealing it.
Well,
because it had that much
group,
vehemence behind
the group that's gone over it has already said they will appeal to the
Right.
United States Supreme Court. So we'll find out. I mean, I'm sure that they will. And it'll be an interesting battle because then that becomes a federal issue and not a state issue.
Right.
And they're going to have a different set of laws they look at.
Which it actually should be already. I mean, why don't the feds come in and say something like,
Well, they're
hello?
very, very worried about us raising marijuana, but not about who we educate.
Right. Scott Harris, our political correspondent. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be speaking about the 25B as a $1 billion deficit that California is facing. You're watching the Maria Sanchez Show right here on KADYTV.com.
Maria's talking, so call Maria, her show is killer. You won't believe it, darling, there's long-time listeners and first-time callers. They love Maria, that's why they keep saying, and we're gonna get loud, but we're gonna get close. She's here and she's going strong. Maria Sanchez, this is the show, darling. She'll give you something to talk about.
Welcome back to the Maria Sanchez Show right here on KADYTV.com. It is Wednesday, November 17th. We're live, so what you see is what you get. Just a reminder that tomorrow we are not broadcasting at 4. We will be broadcasting at 5:30 from the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library just prior to President Bush's arrival. Our understanding is he's being helicoptered in at 5:55 and helicoptered out at 7:05. Decision points. I just finished Condoleezza Rice's book over the weekend, which was actually fantastic, and I've ordered decision points and Laura Bush's book too. So those should be coming any moment now. So
It's going to be fascinating. I mean, you're getting in the news what you would expect. The people who supported President Bush think it's a great book and a candid book and a good look at his presidency. And the people who despise him think it's another effort to hide all of his flaws and errors and mistakes and that he's still Cheney's whipping boy. So I don't think anybody's mind has been changed by the book.
You know what? And my reading, 98% is exclusively nonfiction. And I don't read it to get to like the person. I read it to get to know about the person
Right.
and what informed their decisions
But
and their choices.
You might be said to have an open mind, and most people don't. Most people are going to open that book and they've predetermined whether they're going to like the book or not. I mean, if you hated President Bush for 8 years, you're not going to like the book.
I would think you wouldn't buy it.
Yeah, and it's not surprising that he's speaking at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library. I'm pretty sure if you check his calendar, he's not going to the Jimmy Carter Presidential Library to give a
No,
chat.
but his media blitz included Matt Lauer, Oprah Winfrey, Jay Leno, and then Bill O'Reilly, Greta Van Susteren. So yeah, I guess Lainey Rush and Sean.
Did you see Rachel Maddow on there or Keith Olbermann? Because I didn't hear you mention them.
You know what? Let me tell you this, Scott, about that, and we'll get into the $25 billion budget
Which will be
deficit.
26 by the time we go off
We're
air.
done talking.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of folks don't go to the other camp, not because they can't stand the heat, but because they don't want to give them the largesse of their presence. They don't want to give them the boost. They don't want to give them the cachet. They don't want to give them the little chit in their cap.
Yeah, I
or
don't
whatever.
think President Bush is afraid of Keith Olbermann.
Right.
I
I just think, why would I want to do business
Why
with
would
that
I
guy?
want to do business with a guy?
That's my take. Whatever.
And I think you're probably right. And it goes the other way as well.
Of course,
You know,
absolutely.
It goes the other way as well. I mean, that's the problem with so much of this is it's predetermined. But we're going to run out of time before we solve the $25 billion
And we're going to
budget
solve it,
deficit.
eh?
I think we could. We've got about 8 minutes left, so we should be able to solve that. I mean,
Okay.
it shouldn't be that big of a deal. So the bottom line is this. If you haven't been following it, California has a huge budget deficit. And what happened is the budget came in this year, the latest we've ever come in. Thank you very much for the new record. And we battled and fought and screwed around and made some adjustments in the budget. And most of what we did is we took a $19 billion deficit and shoved it into next year and said, you know what, the heck with it, we're not going to deal with it. We got a new governor coming in, new legislators, we'll let them deal with it. We're going to shove that off to next year. So we shoved $19 billion to next year. But then we thought we were kind of even. We thought we were okay this year. But what happened just in the last 6 weeks is we found a new $6 billion hole. And it's just, when you read this, if you get a chance, for those of you that are watching, look up the Legislative Analyst's Office, which is lao.ca.gov. It's a brilliant source of nonpartisan information on the budget. And I'm going to quote a couple things because I think it's important. Here's their explanation for where this $6 billion surprised everybody. We did not get $3.5 billion of federal funding that we had in the budget that nobody thought we were going to get.
Well, I was going to say, because a lot of it was on speculation and
Nobody thought we were gonna
guesstimation.
get it.
Right.
It's kind of like, you know what, we're going to put the money down that our uncle's going to loan us, but our uncle doesn't have any money and we haven't asked him yet, but we'll put it in the budget anyway.
Yeah.
And, President Obama called and said, sorry, we don't have an extra $3.5 billion, so you don't get it. So, oh my God, now it's the Fed's fault. We passed Prop 22 just a couple weeks ago, and that cost the state $800 million that they were going to steal from the county and the states and whatnot. So now they don't get that, so roughly another $1 billion. And this is shocking, but we under budgeted for the cost of prisons. So, I don't know where you could possibly under budget. It's union labor, you know how much you're paying, you know how many guys are in there, you know how much you've been paying for years and years and years, but suddenly we under budgeted. So,
we guesstimated that people were going to be paroled early.
Oh yeah,
or that we
we'll
weren't
just
gonna
cut them loose.
incarcerate
Just
them.
let them go. That's how we can come up with $25 billion. So let $25 billion worth of criminals go, I guess. So now we've got the $19 billion and the 6, so we're $25 billion in the hole over the next 18 months. But it gets worse than that. In my view, much worse. The LAO, the Legislative Analyst's Office, forecasts that we're going to be down $20 billion additional dollars every year from now until the year 2016.
20 billion?
20 billion
a year
additional.
On top of?
On top of. So every year we're accumulating another 20 billion. In 2012, in the budget year 2012-2013, this is going to be a fun one, and you don't read about this very often. The state has to repay the money that it borrowed last year to jury-rig the budget. So what we did is we went to our last credit card and said, we'll borrow it and balance the budget this year. We'll pay it back in 2012, but we don't have that money. So the budget deficit then is going to grow to $22.4 billion. And the LAO comes out and says, we don't assume cost of living adjustments, but we do expect there will be some. So we think that the budget deficit is going to be far worse than the $22.4 billion.
Now, what does that do to our bond ratings? And
It'll turn them into junk bonds.
I know, and then what?
Well, eventually what happens is we have to deal with the debt. You can only go under the cushion so many times, only go to the credit card so many times, only go back to mom and dad and say, can you help me with the school loan so many times? And eventually there's nowhere else to go for the money. And those of us that have struggled financially, personally, or professionally, know that. There's a few things you can do early on, and everybody's cool, and Bob says, Scott, I know you're good for it. I'll loan you a few $100. The third or fourth time you go to Bob, he's saying, maybe not so much this time. I don't know that I'm going to get back my original loans. I'm not giving you any more. And then we have to make hard decisions. But what happens is when we try to make hard decisions as a state, we've talked about this on your show before, when we furloughed people for a year, Governor Schwarzenegger furloughed people, so he ordered state employees to take a couple, 3 days off a month, and they weren't paid for that time. Well, the courts overturned that. The court said, not only do you have to pay them back with money you don't have for days they didn't work, you got to do it now. Then part of the budget thing was we cut off the family funding, the single mothers of, they were getting some help with child care and whatnot so they could work. That's a brutal thing. 60,000 families were affected. And a judge came in and said, no, I'm not going to allow that either. So that came out after this summary, so that will have to be reloaded back in there as more money that we have to pay out. What's going to have to happen, and this is the tough part for the state of California, is we are going to have to make difficult choices. There's going to be single mothers that don't get help with child care. There's going to be elderly that don't get help. There's going to be libraries and parks that close. There's going to be less public safety. These things are going to have happen because we've done all of the cheap and easy things. And so now Governor Schwarzenegger is saying, you guys have a great life. Good luck, Jerry. Let's make this happen.
Including selling buildings and...
Yeah, we're having garage sales as a state.
Right.
Now, one of the things that's happening is the new state assembly people and state senators are being sworn in on December 6th. And Governor Schwarzenegger has called for a special session of the legislature starting that day. He's saying, you know what, I'm not just going to hand this to Jerry Brown. We're going to try to deal with it right now and see what we can do about this. So he's calling those people together from both parties to say, what are we going to do? And it's an interesting thing because the odds are they won't be able to raise taxes because now we have a new law in place. It has to get a 2/3 pass through us. It has to go out on a ballot proposition, and we ain't going to approve it.
The tax word, but if it has the fee
word. If it has the fee word, but I'm not sure what stomach we have for that right now. So that means in order to balance this budget, they're going to have to do cuts. Well, the courts don't allow them to do cuts. Democrats aren't big fans of cuts. Republicans would like to do cuts, but they never identify where. Just kind of like, well, I think we should generically cut, but no one wants to say we're going to cut here or cut there because then you're actually having to make a decision. It's very easy to say, you know what, Maria, you want things to get better, you got to change your budget, you got to spend less money. Well, help me, where? Where do you want me to cut? Do you want me to cut food? Do you want me not to pay insurance? Do you want me not to pay the house payment? What do you want me to not pay? And that becomes a difficult thing. And I haven't seen any evidence, nobody has seen any evidence that Sacramento is ready to make those decisions yet. And even the little teeny ones they do, somewhere throughout the state, they find a judge who says, not the single moms, oh, not the furloughs, oh, not the libraries. They'll just keep doing that. And you can find a judge who will stop anything. So I don't know how they go about doing this. I don't know where they're going to find the money. And it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And if you read this thing all the way through, history tells us that the state can find ways to temporarily patch over its annual budget problems. Because periodically large influxes of capital gains, like the dot-com money, comes in. There doesn't seem to be any of that on the horizon.
Well, if we make it friendly for big businesses to come here, and workers' comp being a non-issue and all of that stuff, I mean that actually would be
probably tomorrow.
That would be the short and the long-term solution, is if we made California more business friendly. Imagine the infrastructure, the jobs, the taxes, the increased spending with the people being here, the real estate.
Maria has a part-time job with the California Chamber of Commerce, in which she's doing quite well, by the way. And I support you. Unfortunately, Sacramento doesn't.
Well, and not to bring up a sore subject, but Meg Whitman said that when she was the CEO of eBay, she created the PayPal partnership, and they wanted to have 3,500 jobs and build the buildings next to the campus. She said, I thought the state of California was going to be my best friend. 2.5 years later, 25 permits later, 2 consulting firms later, they got it done. She said, if I was in Texas, it would have taken 2 months.
Mm-hmm. If it was slow.
Yeah.
In Nevada, she could start tomorrow. She could just pick some desert and start building. And we continue to do that, and then we're shocked that people don't want to build new businesses here. But we have this green dream. We've got AB 32.
Right.
So,
the green. I like that, the green dream.
Here we go.
Do you have a website that you like to promote for folks to get more information?
On this one, I absolutely do. I think if you get a chance, go to lao.ca.gov, G-O-V.
But in general, about issues?
No, there's dozens of them that I review on a regular basis.
All right.
But these guys are really good at being nonpartisan, regardless of which side of the aisle you're on. They're generally considered by the people I know on both sides of the aisle to be very fair and very honest. And you don't get a lot of that in politics anymore.
When we come back, Mr. Scott Harris takes off his political correspondent hat and he puts on his Mustang marketing hat. And we'll be right back. Thanks for watching the Maria Sanchez Show on KADYTV.com.
Maria's talking, so call Maria, her show is killer. You won't believe it, darling, there's long-time listeners and first-time callers. They love Maria, that's what they keep saying, and we're gonna get loud, but we're gonna get close. She's here and she's going strong. Maria Sanchez, this is the show, darling. She'll give you something to talk about.
Welcome back to the Maria Sanchez Show. We're live. It's Wednesday, November 17th. Thanks so much for joining us. We have Christy Weir coming in next to speak with us about the Father Sarah Cross, and that's an issue that's going on in the city of Ventura. If you have something that you'd like us to promote, get behind, investigate, share the light of day on it, please contact us. On the website, you'll see there's an icon up there that says contact us. That's how we're getting some of our information. Folks are coming ahead. If you are also involved with the 501c3, the priority of this program is to feature one a day because there are over 2,000 in the county. They all have a need, and we want to help expose them as well. Now we're meeting with Scott. This would be Marketing 104.
Marketing 104. That's right, exactly. So we're moving forward.
Yes.
Eventually, we're going to get to the 200 level.
Perfect. That'll be graduate level.
Yeah, I don't have as many as there are nonprofits in the community, but we're good to go. And actually, some of this advice would be good for nonprofits. So some of the things we're going to talk about, I think, would be important. And what I was hoping to talk to you about today was public relations. And public relations is, well, in the simplest terms, I think it's the most underutilized of all the marketing tools. And part of the reason for that is because I think it's the least understood and it's the most difficult to control. What I mean by that is if you buy an ad in the newspaper, you can pick the day, you can pick the page, you can pick the size, the color, and you know exactly what it's going to say. You have complete control. Public relations is a little bit different. Public relations, you have to work with editors and managing editors and a variety of different people to promote your ideas, to promote your stories or your press releases or whatnot, and you go out and you do that. I'm finding in the last couple of years that public relations is getting more attention than it's ever gotten in the past. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. And we'll talk about those reasons. But what I want to do is let people know the tremendous value to public relations relative to other forms of marketing is that it gives a third-party endorsement. If the Ventura County Star, for example, runs an article that says the Maria Sanchez show is a great thing, great use of your time, great way to keep up on the community, and you got to watch KADY TV and boom, 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 and I read that in an article in the Ventura County Star, that enters my mind through one route. If I see an ad from KADY TV with a picture of Maria saying, we're doing all this stuff, I may still look at it, but there's an extra filter on there because I know that Maria is promoting herself.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that you're dishonest or that the ad isn't, but there's a filter that goes through an ad that doesn't go through public relations. So you get that third-party endorsement in what's being said, which lends some validity and credibility to it. So it's a neat thing to do. And
it's interesting that you call it an endorsement, though, because the truth is they're just repeating the facts as they were presented it, unless they sign a reporter to do some investigation.
But even if they just repeat the facts as they're presented to them, there is an assumption that the facts are true.
Okay.
Because it doesn't say as presented by KADY TV. You go to the business section and there's a release, and that release says, boy, KADY TV is changing the rules of local television and their viewership has tripled in the first 6 weeks and all this is happening. And it doesn't say, and this release came from Bob Allen, so take it with a grain of salt. It just says it as a fact. And so that's how we read it. That's how we look at it as readers. The other thing that's changing dramatically, and we've talked about this a little bit, is I believe there's been a paradigm shift in business in the last 2 years. You and I have been through, I'm much older than you, but we've been through
Right.
a couple of recessions. And historically, the recessions we've been through have a pattern, which is we hit a down cycle for whatever reason. And we go through a few months that are tough. So everybody says, we'll cut back the budget, a little less travel, a little less charity, a little less marketing. We'll cut a couple of weak employees. I've been looking for a reason to get rid of Bill anyway, and off we go. The economy picks back up, generally 8 to 12 months later. Budgets go right back up. You fill in the blank spots on your staff, and life goes on. It's not happening this time. People are treating their businesses differently. And so they're saying, you know what, I don't know that I necessarily have to replace Bill. I think we can continue to absorb that work in-house and give ourselves a little more flexibility, a little less, set costs, and so we're doing things differently. What's happening in marketing is historically people have looked at advertising as an expense. We spend this much on advertising. We spend this much on public relations. Now, companies are saying, we're not going to spend money on marketing. We're going to invest money in marketing, and if we can get a return on that investment, then we'll continue to do that. If we don't get a return on that investment, we're going to stop. I had a meeting yesterday with a president of a large company. It's a $3.5 billion company. And we were reviewing the advertising that we've been doing. And this is the first time he's done this, but we had a discussion about radio, about print, and about billboards. Those are the three of the main things we're doing. And the first thing he said is, what kind of return am I getting on my investment in those areas? Those are questions I was never asked 2 or 3 years ago.
And how do you gauge that, though?
Well, there's a number of different ways to do it, and some of it's a little bit, it's not as concrete as we would like. It's not like you buy a stock for $1, it goes up 10%, I got a 10% return on my investment.
Right.
But, forgive me, but what you can do is you can measure the number of calls that come in. You can set up a good tracking system and say how many of those calls converted to sales meetings, how many of those sales meetings converted to sales. You can follow those things through. So there are ways to do it where you can at least take a look at it and start to get an idea. So if you're running, let's say, ads in newspapers and you're getting 10 hits per 100,000 circulation in 3 newspapers, and you go to a 4th newspaper and you get 3 hits per 100,000, you're going to say it's not as good.
Mm-hmm.
It's not black and white as you'd like because those 3 might all convert to sales and you wouldn't know that. But at least it gives you something to measure. And what people are looking for now is give me something Put down something on paper that I can look at and say, what did I get for this? I don't just want to know that, oh, a lot of people know my name now. People are saying, I want phone calls. I want sales meetings. I want sales. I need revenue. I'm responsible now to make sure this happens. So public relations becomes a great tool for that. The other thing that's happened is, and you know this from your media experience, is in almost all forms of media, they've been cutting reporters, cutting everybody, right? So now, more than any point in the 25 years I've been in the business, magazines and newspapers and even radio people are begging for content. Because let's, again, go back to the Ventura County Star. You'd have to ask Joe how many reporters they have today compared to 5 years ago, but it's a lot less.
Right.
Well, there's more people, there's more activity, there's more things going on, but that's a budgetary decision. So now suddenly...
And the paper's a lot thinner.
Paper is a lot thinner, but they would rather they still want some good information in there, so they're more open to columns that are submitted by guest columnists. They're more open to those kinds of things. Trade publications, for example, we have a lot of business-to-business clients, and so they're working in the trade areas. Well, trade magazines are begging for articles from experts, from engineers and whatnot. So you help your clients write those, and it's a delicate balance because it needs to be informative. It needs to be an article and not an ad on your company, but you want to insert just enough in that balance so people know where to find you if they want to. Or at the end of the article, they go, ooh, Maria's pretty smart. She knows a lot about this. I'd like to contact her. And then you do that. So we're finding that publications more than any time in their history are open to the idea of guest articles, guest op-eds, press releases, whatever it might be.
And in case folks didn't get a chance to catch us last week, which we invite you to go back to the archives about that, you made a distinction between marketing and public relations, and a lot of people might not know that
Between
difference.
advertising and public relations.
Okay.
They both fall under the marketing umbrella.
Okay.
But the very simplest way to put it is this. If you have to write a check in order to guarantee placement, which would be an ad or a direct mail piece or a billboard or a radio
mention
spot,
yeah.
that's advertising.
Mm-hmm.
If you are offering it to media outlets and hoping that they run it, that would be public relations.
Okay.
So if the editor decides, it's public relations. If the advertising sales guy gets a commission, it's advertising. And that's kind of the simplest way to do it.
And I don't know if we have enough time, but
1 minute.
In terms of PR and the cost involved with the investment and that versus advertising?
It is, in my view, generally far less expensive than traditional advertising.
Mm-hmm.
It's really the most economical, the highest return on investment. It can't be done exclusively. You have to have other components to your marketing campaign in order to be successful. But to have a marketing campaign and not do public relations is a huge mistake.
Okay. That is Scott Harris, Mustang Marketing, and that was Marketing 104. You're watching the Maria Sanchez Show right here on KADYTV.com. We'll be right back. The Maria Sanchez Show is about the county, by the county, and for the county. Whether we're broadcasting